Good evening, folks. My name is Jess Drace Tiergan, and the following recording is created for the Aspen University, the Social Psychology of Groups course. All right, folks. Thank you for joining me here today. I want to begin by talking about groups through the lens, through the theoretical framework of performance. When we talk about the theoretical framework of performance, what we're talking about is all the different elements, all the different pieces of a group that end up creating a result or end up creating what would be called the output of the group. And there are primarily 5 elements that go into the theoretical framework for group performance. And those elements are the group members themselves, the group task, the group interaction process, the group output, which is what the group is trying to accomplish, and then the context that the group exists in. And these elements all impact each other. So all these elements not only impact, so the output might be the element that we look at with the most interest because we're concerned about what the group is producing. Especially in a very capitalistic society, usually we're looking at what a group is producing or what the outcome of a group is. But a lot of these elements impact each other, and we can pick apart different pieces of this theoretical framework and figure out how one of these pieces alters other portions of these pieces. So if we're looking at the group members, the way the group membership is made up is going to impact how the group interacts. And the way the group interacts is going to alter depending upon what the task is that the group is trying to accomplish. And the interaction process is going to interact along with the members and the task to create what the output is. And then the overall context is the context that the group is in. And that can be a micro level context, perhaps a company, some other form of microsystem along those lines, a larger team, a company, a business, a city, or we can look at large scale contexts, which could be a city, it could be a socioeconomic status, it could even be our country as a whole, or it could be even our world as a whole. And these contexts impact how groups interact. They impact the group members themselves, and they impact the group dynamics. And this theoretical framework lets us examine, if we have a group that is breaking down, it lets us examine these different elements to understand where the possible struggles or failings are. It also allows us to understand as leaders what elements we need to be aware of and the pieces that we need to be working toward and creating excellence in to be able to produce excellence in leadership and create a group that is cohesive, to create a group that is effective, and ultimately the goal, even above effectiveness, is to create a group that's healthy. The next thing I want to touch on briefly is the idea of a multi-level system when we're looking at groups. And when we're talking about multi-level systems in regards to groups, this is the idea that we can examine groups on the individual level. So if we're talking about the expertise of a group, we could be talking about the expertise that's particular to each individual in the group, or we could be talking about the expertise that the group as a whole has, because all the pieces, all the members of the group coming together have a joined expertise. And this indicates the different levels, the different places in the system of a group, and different ways to look at a group. And when we're looking at multi-level systems in a group, we can look at a top-up approach or we can look at a bottom-down approach. And either way, there's some benefits and deficits to either of these methods of looking at this. But it lets us understand that groups have different almost steps. Like I almost view it as a staircase. Neither one is more accurate. If we're talking about groups on the individual level, that's not an inaccurate or a incorrect way to think about it, but perhaps it is a limited way to some degree, because perhaps the group as a whole is greater than the group is on an individual basis. And so that's something we definitely get to consider as leaders, and consider ways in which we lead groups and create groups that can be greater than the individual, where the group members can empower each other and they can greater empower themselves to reach toward what's possible instead of just sitting in what currently is. And I believe that's an excellent segue into this next and last section that I want to touch on briefly. And that's these ideas of how groups impact individuals' behavior. Basically, talking about how being watched or being observed or being in a group versus working individually, how that can impact the type of performance that we see either from ourselves or from our team members. And the two different effects that I want to touch on are co-action and audience effects. The co-action effect is this idea that if we are working toward a common goal with a team, or perhaps even working toward a common goal with an opponent, or against an opponent, often our performance improves. So we see this if a team is playing and they see one of their team members striving for excellence, perhaps there are members that will rise to that occasion and try to match his level or her level or their level of intensity. On the flip side of that, if it's an opponent, if you're in a race and someone is right next to you and they're running hard and fast, there's this press and this desire to match that. And I consider this, a personal example of this is, I've trained for a lot of years in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and when we're on the mats and we're training, it's easy to train at low levels when you're training with newer students and people that are not as skilled and not as comfortable in the activities, not as comfortable in the dojo, and it's easy to match their level. And then I notice when I'm training with an opponent, like if I'm training with one of my black belt instructors and they are pushing hard and they are pushing to, pushing beyond my skill level, and pushing hard and accomplishing, very advanced moves and very complicated moves, I am willing and able to push myself in ways during those rolling sessions that I never would individually and that I never would with another opponent that was less skilled. And this is the co-action impact, this impact of going harder, pressing harder, pursuing with greater diligence when there's someone else there with us. And the next portion that I want to talk about is this audience effect. And the audience effect can go either way. Some of this seems to be based on personality, some of it seems to be based upon the size of the group. But an audience effect can either lead someone to, again, perform with more excellence. So we might see this with some folks that love to be on stage, and the second they see a full crowd, they rise to that occasion. On the flip side, the audience effect can also lead folks to really struggle to perform. They can feel like they're being watched, they can feel like they're being scrutinized, and it can be a very hard space to actually reach your full potential. And when I think about this, I think of when I was in my mental health counseling program and I was doing some sessions and had to have someone observing my sessions, and realized how difficult it was to genuinely and authentically connect with another human and try to do deep trauma work and deep soul healing type work when there's another person in the room that is not involved in the work, that's actively critiquing every move you make. And I found myself stumbling, and I found myself being uncomfortable, and I found myself struggling to build excellent rapport with my clients because I was wondering, like, am I talking too much? Am I not talking enough? Are my facial expressions appropriate? Am I practicing reflective listening appropriately, so forth and so on, and got so much in my head. And this is that audience effect, having that audience in that room, someone else critiquing and watching and observing my every move, made it so I couldn't do the job that I can do with excellence on a normal basis. I could not do it well because I was being watched. So these are some interesting elements that we've looked at today when we're considering social psychology. These are some interesting ways in which we as individuals impact groups and interesting ways in which groups impact us as individuals. I greatly appreciate your time, and I'll look forward to seeing you later. Peace.